35 a.m. Senate Natural Resources and Energy, we're coming back to Bill S-254 relates to extended producer responsibility for batteries, rechargeable batteries. A question came up late yesterday about batteries contained in products, particularly if those batteries were not produced by a producer that's in the program. Would that producer of that product now become the entity that was responsible for the appropriate handling of that battery? Okay.
Did you do that again? Zoom?
It did send you a Zoom link, but
When was that?
I thought I labeled it today, so I can send you another one. Sorry.
I think I could do this, just I'm not finding it out.
It's very clear. So.
Morning, Richard. We're doing about, I think, 5 or 10 minutes of work on this issue that popped up in the last half day. And just bigger picture for the committee or following this bill here. A brief discussion, see if we have an agreeable path forward. And then ask council to draft it and bring us a bill, and then tomorrow we'd be in position to vote.
The bill has not changed as of yet.
Okay.
So. Michael, are you just gonna share a fragment like proposed language?
Yeah.
Waiting for me, sorry. There you go. I resent the Zoom link.
We're just recharging.
How is it?
Hard.
Sam McCormick should
Terrible.
lead us in a song while we're in these comments.
Don't.
Don't encourage.
Have
We about to say.
you heard his music? It's
I live in the East Village in 1963. I don't.
So,
I have to, so I was just now writing the full report for the Charter of Waterbury.
Yes.
Which has a section that reorders the appendix to keep it all in alphabetical order. There are so many towns in Vermont that begin with W. Do you know how many towns there are? Okay.
well, villages are connected. Williston,
Not
Whitingham,
villages.
okay, Williston,
40.
Whitingham, Winooski,
Like,
Waterbury.
There's six.
Look, we're no, Williamton, Waybridge.
we're live.
West Warren.
We're live.
There's a lot.
there are a lot of W's in the Senate.
There's so many.
So we are, paused and we get some proposed new language to be rolled in FQ4. Mr. O'Grady, if you could, since you've been, if you could tee up the issue as you understand it for the committee and then walk us through the language, please.
So, this is Michael Green, Senate Council. The issue arose over the past couple of days of whether and to what extent a manufacturer of a battery containing product would need to participate in the product stewardship organization and basically fulfill all of the requirements that a battery producer would need to fulfill. And there were concerns that some of these manufacturers, especially with the batteries that they're included with them were skirting requirements. Because the batteries that were in the products are not part of any current program or will not be part of the present or future. But the way that the language is drafted in S-254 as introduced, it's slightly overbroad because the intent is to get the batteries. It's not to get the toy into the program or the flashlight. It's to get the batteries into the program. So even if the battery producer was already part of the program, the language that's drafted would have also applied to that toy maker or flashlight maker, even though the batteries were already part of the program. So it was overbroad in
There's
how.
gonna be potential for double pain.
Yeah, so you would have somebody, a toy manufacturer that was in the program. Let's just Hasbro 2, whatever you wanna call it. Hasbro 2 sends out, a Barbie car with batteries in it, but they're Energizer batteries, and Energizer is already part of the program. Why is the Barbie car part of the program? Because but if it's, you've all seen this, I see it particularly like in the TVs I've bought over the past couple of years. You get the remote, you open the remote, there's batteries in there. I don't even know what language that is on, I can't even identify, enough of the language is, let alone if they're a brand that would be part of the program. And so in that case, where those batteries are not part of the producer, not part of the stewardship program, then that product is going to be subject to regulation. And the language needed to be clarified to address that. And so I haven't been the point person, Matt Chapman has been the point person, and with all of the relevant parties. And this morning, Matt sent some language that said, hey, basically, they think they can address this by amending the definition of what a battery containing product means. And what they would add was language to say what it does not include. And when I read this, I'm like, some of the language, I think the way it was drafted, I didn't like how it was showing up in the definition section.
Yeah.
So I proposed, hey, why don't we make it a list and say a battery containing product does not include an electronic product if the only batteries contained in or supplied within the product are supplied by a producer that has joined a registered battery stewardship organization as the producer for that covered battery. So the battery maker is already in the program. And the producer of the covered batteries that are included in the battery containing product provides a written certification of that membership to both the producer of the battery containing product containing one or more covered batteries and the battery stewardship organization. So the battery stewardship organization knows that the producer is part of the program and that producer's battery is in this product, and the maker of that product knows too, so that they know that they don't have to comply with the requirements of this program. And then there was a last provision that both the battery containing product producer and the battery supplier participate in the same battery stewardship organization for certification. But remember, in sub 2, you've just informed the product manufacturer that they don't need to be in the stewardship organization because the producer's in the stewardship organization. So why do you need 3? And that, I think, is a point that Jen Holiday and Bill Driscoll agree on, that you don't need 3, you just need 1 and 2. That the batteries supplied in the product are supplied by a producer that has joined a registered battery stewardship organization, and then the producer of the covered batteries that are included provides a written certification of membership to both the producer of the battery containing product and the battery stewardship organization.
So they're certifying, we don't have an obligation because I fulfill it.
Right. The bill, the rest of the bill's language will still say a battery containing product, battery can, you know. It will reference the producer of the battery containing product. But that is for somebody who has batteries in it. Batteries in their product, that is not participating in a stewardship organization.
And they won't gain this exclusion, definitely.
They won't qualify for this exclusion, so they will remain a producer that is subject to the requirement.
Since any, Mr. Driscoll or Ms. Holiday, any that 1 and 2 from your point of view satisfy the concerns you bring to the.
So Bill Driscoll for AIB, yes, I think Mr. Brady summed it up pretty well, and we would support that complete to what's proposed.
Then Holiday Treatment Solid Waste District, this looks clear and fine with us. Yeah.
Consider Watson?
Thank you. I am hesitant to bring this up because like I am so delighted that you all are in favor of this language, including striking 3, I assume. I'm just envisioning how this would go, and the producer of the so first of all, the producer of the batteries would probably have some kind of contract with the product manufacturer, so they're gonna know who is using their batteries, so they know who to send that certificate to. And then they've also got to send it to the battery stewardship organization. Cool, that's great. I guess maybe this is not a point of concern, but I just like there's just so like the volume of products is it's gotta be incredible. And that's I'm just anticipating, I guess I'm worried about logistics, like it's just an incredible list. That, I mean, it's gonna be like many thousands of products, I imagine, and maybe that's fine. I just wanna make sure that, like, I'm just counting the cost in my head of like what that would look like. It just seems like a lot.
So, you're not seeing it on the screen, but, in the bill, it provides that. And I'm looking up on my phone because I want to keep the screen up, that products that are covered by the e-waste law, cover electronic devices law, and that recycling program, that stewardship program, they're not part of this program.
Right, okay,
So they're already covered, so
okay,
you're probably taking thousands of product off of the list that you have in your head.
okay, yep,
And
yeah, that helps,
they have to be easily removable
right.
in this, and you have kids, I know you have seen some of those toys where it is not easily removable.
Yes, I was just talking about one of those where I'd have to cut it open to like
Right.
get to the battery.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Don't let the kids see.
Yeah.
Are the ones that are designed to be obsolete once the battery dies because you cannot get to
Right,
it.
right.
Um,
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you. Just wanted to just say that out loud, you know, as a concern, so that helps. Thanks.
Great, so, sounds like we have a solution to the. Like if you could include it in draft, and then we'd like to be able to vote on it tomorrow.
okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks. Cool, now I guess we're gonna have a complete mindset here.
Thank you, guys.
In the world of building energy standards. And, we're fortunate to have Mr. Paisley come back in here to help us, get us really, we did a walkthrough on the bill already, so people have seen the language. Yeah, oh, please, yeah, you could join us at the table.
253. Yes.
Yes, so we did the walkthrough, but that's a while ago, and we've had a lot of water over the since then. The house versions. They just happened. And so my hope is that the committee will take this up. It's quite a narrow bill. It's a big issue, but a narrow bill. Maybe we'll do a little adjusting and be able to vote this out in time for fall. In order to keep modest progress we've made continuing in the right direction. So thank you for coming back in and bringing us back to the world of building energy standards.
A little different than batteries.
Battery, dams,
There's a problem.
wetlands, and fish and wildlife.
Right. So logistically, does Jude run the PowerPoint or just go, you've got paper copy in front of you?
Sign up.
And for, okay, so I mean, I have it on my laptop, but I don't.
You wanna run it on the screen?
I think it's helpful to just.
Yeah.
Focus, because then if there are people online.
I believe I sent you a Zoom link, so if you've got that, you can share your screen.
Yes.
I'm sure, you can't share, it, but
It would be fine, you do it.
You would run it off your lap.
Yeah.
So the hearings are, yeah, no, it's
is
like
that too much? Well, maybe that's too much, the logistics.
We have an hour and 5.
I'll try.
So. Maybe especially for people who are remote, I don't know who's remote and all that, we'll be able to
I bet it's a robust audience.
follow. Never address.
I mean, they can go to the website and follow it.
Well, we have a second, there's 156 pounds, 39 of them begin with W.
39.
39. That's 15.2%, just in case you know that.
Yeah, I guess 40.
So, well, that's one of those.
Have to do.
The price is right rules.
Yeah.
Half of them are expensive. Yes. That's why the W in my last name, it's a good letter.
Well, when you listen to roll calls on the floor, a lot of them, it's like 6 or 7.
Underrated. There's a lot of ones. Yeah, M's though. They're great too, they're just the upside down end of it.
There's only one U.
I can't talk to you right now, sorry, 1 minute.
On you.
you. Right, is that what you're
Oh, under him.
Oh, very good, well done.
Cindy and I used to do that during all court.
You know, the other one, and there's a lot of B characters,
There are indeed.
so many. B's, and they're just
Very short on that.
uncreative. And then
Brattleboro, clearly we're close.
Oh.
Well, I changed.
No, it's fall visibility from.
Just
I usually have.
Sounds rough.
Well,
Very-
no, maybe I didn't change it right, I don't.
Just give me the answer.
Yeah.
So you have to let me in?
So you're in.
That works, okay.
Well, I let you in. I don't know if you're in. Yeah, and once I let you in, it says join.
There you
There you
go.
go, we're different.
No, you can be.
And so, and then kind of so that
And then I make, oh,
share.
Oh, and you gotta turn off the volume.
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
should be good now.
share.
Wunderbar.
It says they. How do you spell?
Okay, prayer.
Oh,
So I've got, I'm Andrew Fazy, Energy Futures Group, based in Heinsberg, I live in Starksboro. And we, EFG was, contracted by the Department of Public Service last summer to support the Act 47 Building Energy Code Study Committee. And so, Senator Bray asked me to come in and review that. I've got about a dozen slides. Some of them are a little dense because I wanted to leave all the information there, but I'm not gonna speak every word in all of them. And I also, given that you've allocated an hour or so from now, I assume that there would be adequate time to have a conversation or but I want to meet your expectations as well too. So I sort of saw this as a working session. If I sort of tee things up in terms of what the committee recommended and then make some suggestions along the way and certainly here to have a follow-up conversation.
Right, yeah, exactly. So 253 is quite narrow. There are many more recommendations or considered recommendations in that working group. But my goal was to take some of what happened that was and move it forward so we would keep the issue on track to make progress in the years ahead.
Great, okay. So Act 47, which was originally, I think, S100, is that right? It was the housing bill last week. So it was
Into the housing bills.
yes, it was a component of that broader housing bill. So a broad committee representing a lot of the building and energy interests were part of this. And we were the staff, oh yes, so there it is. So Act 47, formerly S100, we did a lot of work after kicking off the early summer. We had 10 meetings from mid-July through November 30th and submitted the report, which is 50 pages, something like that. It's on the legislative report.
And I will also put it on our committee page has it as well.
Okay. And so this is a summary of what was in that report. So just as in terms of background, in that Act 47, there were 5 General Assembly findings, which the committee certainly agreed with, but added some to as well too. But I think just to set the foundational stage, it's important to just sort of review the fact that we do have, despite the fact that some would say, do we really have a building energy code in Vermont? We do, and it's been in place since 1997 for residential buildings and 2007 for commercial buildings. The Public Service Department, PSD, regularly, and this is a point of contention, or was part of the discussion there, and is part of your proposed bill as well too. They regularly update those codes, but they don't have any authority to administer or enforce them. So that's really the issue here. They can adopt new updated codes, but the provision that's in RBs and CBs is basically if somebody finds faults, they would need to go sue the builder, and that rarely happens. There's some cases there. So and as well too, there's this word promptly that's in the original bill that the department has taken to mean every 3 years or so. And so that's because it's the code is generally based on a national code, the International Energy Conservation Code. So it's a national body that updates the code every 3 years, and then Vermont sort of looks at that and tweaks it, customizes it for Vermont, and updates a local version of that. And because that happens in a 3-year cycle, the department has interpreted that the word promptly to mean follow the national standard. So there's some discussion about that, and part of your placeholder bill has some language that opens up that or addresses that interpretation of how often it needs to be updated.
Sure. And then a super short side is that this rule, the last iteration of updating the code, came to LCAR last summer. And a lot of builders showed up and said they were worried about failures under the current code, much less push things to a higher level of code in terms of energy performance. And it related in a very brief way to things like, were buildings breathing well enough, not end up with walls full of mold and stuff like that. So there's a lot more to it, but so LCAR asked, hit the pause button on implementing that update, which normally would just happen 3 months later. And that code update has been pushed off till July 1, 24. In order to let this committee and other committees look at the issue.
So one of the second finding, it was, we spent a lot of time on the study committee addressing the realization that no state agency or office is designated to be the authority having jurisdiction, or the body who's designated to interpret, administer, or enforce the code. So I'll speak to this later, but the logically, the Division of Fire Safety would be that body, but they have not been given that authority. They're currently responsible for building codes, but those are only for public buildings and not for privately owned buildings. So that's where the line gets drawn.
Right. And they look at plumbing, electricity, fire code, and elevator,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
But not energy.
right, energy is not part of it. As part of this too, the Department of Public Service does these compliance studies every 3 to 5 years. The most recent one was actually based on, you have to look at homes that were built a couple of years before the last version of the code, because they have to have some performance history in order to sort of see how they're performing in the field. So the last study they did was based on the 2015 code. Since then, there's been a 2020 code, which we're under now, and then in July, Senate Brain will have a 2024 code. So 2 code cycles ago, essentially, Arby's was at about 54%. Some would say that actually is higher than, numbers have been thrown around less than that, but this is based on that study. What happened during COVID, so there was a limited sample size. Well, 2 people didn't want people come to their house and do anything, but CVS does better. The commercial side, generally, probably because there are professionals involved in the design and the construction, and people's licenses are on the line. If engineers and architects, they follow the letter of the law generally, and so CVS has always been shown to comply at a higher level than residential buildings. The state does have a goal of net zero ready construction by 2030, so that's not far away. How are we going to get there if we're 50% compliance? And lastly, finding 2, Energy Futures Group applied in partnership with the Secretary of State's office as the state agency partner, because the Department of Energy required a state agency to be part of that. And we received a $1 million code support grant that will be working with them and the efficiency utilities and BAPTA and others over the next 3 years. So that is a resource that's available, primarily focused on training, builder training around code updates. So I'm probably going to, taking too much time, but I think it's important to provide the background. So just visually, this is a really helpful graphic that AAA Vermont put together. They're part of the committee too. Every other state except Vermont has this structure where there's an authority that has oversight over single family homes. And that's, they have oversight over building codes. Energy codes are a subset of building codes. Training falls within that. Whereas in Vermont, there isn't a hierarchical structure. There isn't a general authority over single family homes. There's no residential building code. We do have entities playing different roles in the state, but it's not coordinated or under a single authority. So Division of Fire Safety, as Senator Bray indicated, they have authority over smoke detectors, plumbing, licensing of electricians, etc. Department of Public Service has authority over updating the code, but not enforcing them. And then the training, we actually group from Southern Vermont, Sion, has organized the dozen or so organizations in Vermont that do builder training currently, voluntarily and we're working together to try to come up with sort of a unified approach. There's sort of we have the Weatherization Assistance Agency, we have Efficiency Vermont, we've got the Association of General Contractors and Home Builders Association. I mean, they're all AIA, there are all of these organizations that are out there that are doing training, but there's not a coordinated entity or body overseeing that. But they're, voluntarily, we're working to try to come together on some common standards. So the Act 47 committee was given 3 charges specifically. One was to assess how building energy codes interact with fire and safety, with DPS, and actually specifically consider the designation of DFS as the statewide authority having jurisdiction, or AHJ. And then sort of a third piece, I'm not going to spend as much time on this, is to look at, we have some recommendations, but I think that they're they don't rise to the surface, but for this committee, but looking at how the cost effectiveness analysis is done for determining how these codes are updated.
Sorry, what is AHJ?
Authority having jurisdiction. So it's the,
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
sorry, it's
It's fine.
it's that single entity that would oversee all of this.
That's AHJ. Gotcha.
There's a lot of acronyms, sorry.
That's fine. And so that's like, so it's a way to talk about how it's governed in other states. One would talk about like the AHJ.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it would be, Division of Fire Safety's counterpart, whatever it may be called in the other state. So I've got a couple slides here that are right out of the report to the legislature. And they are the first, this one and the next one were really, we organized them as directed towards, you can see the orange row, the recommendations for immediate legislative action. So, and the way that these tables were organized, we have the recommendation and then the timeframe for implementation. So we felt that the committee felt that these should be addressed this year in this session. Phase 2 would be later. It was sort of undefined what that would be, but not immediate. We named who the entity we felt would be responsible for carrying that out, the funding source, and then the centers. So there was not unanimity for all the recommendations, and so those who did not want to fully support that recommendation or had some concerns were listed in these recommendations as well too. So I'll just keep going through here. The first one, sort of highest level, as you could probably tell from my introductory discussion, is the need for an AHJ, an authority having jurisdiction, and we had a lot of discussions about who that should be, and should it be the Department of Public Service, should it be Efficiency Vermont, should it be, but logically, I think that the committee came to the consensus that it really, given the role that Division of Fire Safety has right now in overseeing codes, it would make the most sense to broaden their responsibilities to include energy codes as well too. And as part of that too, there's a recognition that there's not even a building code in the state. So if somebody who's building a deck and want to know what the height of the railing should be, who do they call? What are the standards that they should be built to? What's the stair risers be? Sure, there are people have opinions and there are different standards that are out there, but Vermont has not adopted a single statewide building code. And that's, so that and underneath that, the energy code would logically live as well, too, sort of this hierarchy, HJ and then building code and then energy code. That doesn't mean we can't make some progress in the energy code pieces, because I think the realization is that this discussion about building code for the state of Vermont is a longer term conversation. And it needs to include more than just the people who are on the study committee focusing on energy compliance. So we wanted to tee that up at least, and so I think your bill made some mention of that as well too, and might put in place a study committee to look at that. But designating a single HJ, clarifying the chain of authority. Right now, there's some ambiguity in terms of statute, in terms of the chain of authority from the General Assembly through the Division of Fire Safety to the municipalities. And I can't follow the technicalities, maybe others here know exactly what that is, but we did have some conversation in committee, and there is language that's unclear about how that chain flows through. As part of the other licensure that the Division of Fire Safety has, they have advisory committees with expertise with people from within that industry that the DFS turns to. So establishing one that would help with future code revisions, oversee building failure cases, improve building science and future code. So providing some expertise to that authority, having jurisdiction to help implement what's put forward. The recommendation was that the Department of Public Safety continue, they do a good job at regularly updating the code, and they've got that expertise, so there's a suggestion they continue playing that role. And then as part of this too, there's no way for a consumer to know whether the builder they're thinking about hiring knows about the code, or has been trained in it, or has expertise in building science to make sure there are not going to be issues in the home that they're building. And so developing some sort of certification designation for contractors trained in energy codes, and include that in the Office of Professional Regulations Contractor Registry and on the Division of Fire Safety website. So OPR, the next page, I believe, has a number of recommendations about the Office of Professional Regulations. But as you may recall, there was a last year, after a number of years of discussion, there was put into place a contractor registry that's required for projects over, for builders that are working on projects over $10,000 in value. And right now, it's a little challenging to define. I'll talk about that in a second, but there's no way on that currently to designate whether somebody understands the code or agrees to follow it as part of registering for that.
So one quick thing is just with two members of GovOps, one possibility is that when you register, there'll be a checkbox that says, I acknowledge that there's a residential and commercial building energy code in the state of Colorado. You're not certifying that you know it, you're just saying, I'm aware, because we've run into this before. Accepted agricultural practices, which we renamed required in order to help make it clearer to people that you do need to follow them if you're in world agriculture. Required building codes, they've been required since 97. People say I'm unaware. The idea was just help make it more explicit. So you register and you check a box. Who knows if that's the right answer? But it was something as simple as that. We didn't want to get into the whole thing of it opens the door to a much bigger discussion. It's A4. What's that?
It's not us.
Ooh. Right.
That is A4 on this recommendation. I'll just walk through the research.
Can we have a copy of the full list of recommendations, or?
Yes, that's an associate.
So that's all of them?
Yes, yeah. So I'll just go through from the top. So you have in 253 right now, the placeholder A2, amending the energy code update cycle, but changing shall, this promptly update the code to May or something to that effect. I mean, it doesn't exactly say that, but I think that was the intent of your proposed language. It's in there.
And that was to, if we saw that there was already a failure to train, inform, measure, certify a current code. The question was why push to a higher level of code, particularly if for some people following it without a deeper knowledge of how to use that code well could increase the likelihood of building failure. There's some people who are super informed in doing it, they're outstanding, other people unaware and we saw, examples of building failures and. It's the biggest investment most people ever make in their life, we like to help. Get good value and the consumer protection.
Yeah,
So anyway,
so Mr. Chair, just so I completely understand, the change you were talking about before. The main reason that I understand people don't believe we have a building and energy code or any kind of standard is because it doesn't feel enforced.
Exactly.
So the current way that we enforce is through our town clerks essentially, or through our towns.
They're
They register now.
they're required to submit a one-page certificate
To
to
their
the town clerk,
It's-
the Department of Public Service, and to leave it at the property. So it's 3 places, but nobody's keeping an eye on that. There's a, I don't know where they end up.
It's our builder, right?
I'm sorry, the builder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the builder.
Yes, essentially the builder.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a provision in there if you're doing self-construction, if you're,
Yeah.
basically it's good, yeah.
Okay. So we're still keeping the enforcement kind of at the town level then?
I wouldn't say it's enforcement, it's just
Yeah.
it's record keeping.
Okay, but I would say the record keeping is the form of enforcement. Cause no one's going out and shaking a finger or
And
sending.
but the towns not, right, and some of the towns, you're right, some of the towns will not issue a certificate of occupancy
Okay.
without that RB certificate. Is that uniform across all 252 towns? No, right.
So you don't recommend anything of that nature, like being more, you don't get a certificate of occupancy?
Well, we do have some recommendations in here under B. That right now, there's no central repository, there's no way to check who's building to what, whether the certificate has been submitted. So we felt like we needed a statewide database into which, as your property is being proposed, there's before you move forward with a permit or whatever happens at the local level. There be some, you show that you understand that the code, that you've done the calculations, or you submitted your path of compliance with the code. And then once so that would go into a statewide database, and once the property is finished, you would then submit the final completed form.
Okay.
Certificate.
Your next recommendation answers all the questions that I have in this section B. But when maybe you'll talk about it more.
Yeah.
But when you are recommending this database,
It doesn't exist now, and.
Yeah.
So, right, so
So,
we have to
but-
create.
totally, so I hear you on that. But then you wouldn't have the towns hold on to it?
That's right. It would relieve the towns of that obligation.
Okay.
Which I think
I
the
like
towns
that a lot.
would probably welcome.
They would welcome that. But the requirement for the certificate of occupancy still comes from the town.
I believe that's a state statute.
Okay, so
For those towns that issue certificate of occupancy, not all do, is my understanding. I think it's happening.
I'm getting into the weeds now, but I would like to understand more on
Yeah,
who is
well, and you're
then,
even 5 years in this competition, start to see how many loose ends there are. I think that's part.
Exactly.
well, your diagram at the beginning was very helpful.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, those are excellent questions, and I'd say let's acknowledge them and keep going. No, because there are many places where we don't have a coherent system out there to deal with this. There's bits and pieces here and there.
That's why this all sort of rolled up to that authority having jurisdiction, non-existing. There's nobody to watch the shop here, and so there's a lot of pieces that happen or maybe happen or don't. We've got some great builders in the states that are exceeding these standards, and we have others who don't even know that this exists. So,
Okay.
so
Going.
so I'll keep going. So there are, I mentioned this, A3 is establishing a study committee on the residential, building code, that's, the broader building code. And for example, the International Residential Code is sort of the standard that would be, but And then we have a number of recommendations, 8, 4, 5, and 6, that pertain to the Office of Professional Regulation. And so this is sort of, in the absence of an authority having jurisdiction, we felt like we could make some progress building on the contractor registry that exists right now. So as Senator Bray indicated before, as contractors who are, as of, I believe, April, required to sign up, they should be explicitly have that checkbox that says they acknowledge that RVs procedures exist. Then we had some discussion about if they check that box and they build a property that's not built to code determined later, does that constitute fraud? The consumer registry is there for consumer protection purposes, really sort of the. So there is some opportunity to leverage that registry to encourage builders to get familiar with the code so they can honestly indicate that they're familiar with it. So it's sort of a chicken and egg situation here. We have been offering, there have been trainings around all of this that have been offered for years, but the attendance seems to have dropped off. There's no real impetus to go learn about this because there's nobody enforcing it. So if there was a stick in there, if there's some requirement you needed to know what this is about, we would have an opportunity to get builders in the classroom or do it out on their job site, teach them building science, codes. So these pieces could be linked together. As well too, this could, having the contractor registry with this indication on it would alert consumers that they would have builders. Well, this is also the contractor registry could also benefit from having certifications on it too. So those builders who went above and beyond and had Passive House or Energy Star or had high PERS or low PERS ratings, whatever the designation may be, if there's a place on the registry, consumers could look and understand who the better contractors were, or those who had that expertise and knowledge.
That's not part of the registration now.
Not correct.
And there was a discussion about, well, what certifications would be meaningful and because there's more than one outfit that can offer certification. So without dragging into that rabbit hole. But it would be maybe over time a way to help consumers shop for something.
Exactly.
They want to build a passive house and they look for someone who's passive house certified.
There, 8.5 also indicates the OPR provides a template for a contract between builder and consumer. So if we could put language in there that indicates that the builder promises to build to all state laws, including RVs, that would be a step in the right direction. So
And super logical. Guess. Chairman Cormier.
How far down does this reach in terms of the size of an operation, of a builder's operation? In other words, I can see this like that there are construction companies out there, there are developers, and then there are guys running a business out of their pickup. The local guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who picks up a gig.
yeah.
Okay, is this regulating him and?
If it's over 10,000, if the contract, correct me if I'm wrong, man, but if the contract is over $10,000, then they would need to register. Is it one
Any single contract.
in any
You
year?
could do $5,000 contracts all year, excuse me, Andrew Brewer with Down Drive with Martin. You could do $5,000 contracts or $9,999 all day long and never trigger the need to register, but
Yeah, but you remodel a bathroom.
it doesn't take much to get to 10,000.
Yeah, these days,
That's so true. Wah, wah.
full disclosure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's-
I'm gonna make a call.
yeah.
It needs his name, address, and social.
And what's his birthday?
Okay, sorry.
So it says $10,000. And then are the regulations per contract or per the contractor?
Per contract, the statute has 4 basic provisions for the it could pretty close to a back of paper napkin and say, but
Yeah.
price, work dates, scope of work. A change order provision in case there's some changes, some language about down payments, but very simple requirements for a contract.
Okay, but the guy, so the $10,000 contract triggers. Regular for that contract, or no, that contractor is now.
You're not registered.
You're now in the club,
Yes,
okay,
yes,
forever or for the year?
2 years.
And now we know, I mean, up to this point in time, we don't know who the builders are, including those ones who run out of their pickup truck. So
Yeah.
there hasn't been an opportunity to inform them, to promote trainings, so this is part of this as a way to put in place a process for communicating with that community. So I'll jump to B. So this is really about, we really just talked about this as well too. So an opportunity for a statewide database that incorporates the information on the certificates. So publicly accessible, would relieve the town record requirements and notarization requirements. And it could also, as I mentioned before, could be a trigger for a permit, if the town's looking for issuing a permit before construction and making sure that the builder is aware of what their obligations are. And then once it's complete, a final certificate so that that's on the record for future searches by appraisers or others as well too.
Thank you. So I'm just noticing for all of B, the responsible entities, DFS or the other, if there's a different,
Authority having
authority having jurisdiction. But I mean, my guess is that, well, my assumption, I guess, is that DFS wouldn't just do this on their own.
DFS needs to be told to do it.
Right, and so I guess I'm wondering, like, seems like that's also legislature.
Yes.
On that.
Right, it could be, yes. They are going through a database redesign and rebuild right now.
Oh, cool.
So we saw this as an opportunity. I mean, it would be a separate module, so it doesn't have to be part of it, but yeah,
But it would probably need to come in build form to be like, we need you to.
good suggestion. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to, I'm just trying to keep track of like.
Yeah.
What are the suggestions compared to what is in the bill?
Right.
Yeah, they had, Mike DeRocher was, who runs, heads up the Department of Fire Safety. Was a very active participant all the way through and saw value in all these things, but also pointed out that his department is already stretched super thin,
sure.
trying to do all the work they're already doing. So the idea of taking out anything more, was like,
There'll be more staff.
wait, don't add to our to-do list, and so that one, belongs to us, and then if we designate something, and then we have an obligation, to provide resource.
It's fair.
But for now, the current division fire safety couldn't do the work, and he wanted to be really clear that they didn't have that capacity.
He was very clear.
He was very clear.
And then
Yeah.
And then the rest of the slides here are non-legislative and longer term recommendations. So these, while we felt like all of these items needed to be done, they didn't necessarily belong to the legislature to take care of them. So there's and as I mentioned before, Sion and others have started this C1. They sort of look at the support and pulled all the trainers together, coordinating, supporting energy code trainings and certification. So there's a voluntary group that's working on this right now. And all of the responsible and are at the table. And this is until there's an authority having jurisdiction, but we're sort of out there on our own trying to figure this out. And part of the grant I mentioned before can help pay part of this. Part of the grant too is going to be, we'll be hiring a circuit rider, a full-time position for the last 2 years of the grant, who will be out there on site, helping builders out with compliance, doing training, talking to regional planning commissions and others.
I'm sorry, I just need help with the definition of circuit rider.
I don't know, it's a term of art, I guess. It's basically a person whose responsibility it is to promote and educate on the energy code. It's, an advocate and a trainer, a support liaison, I'm not sure where that, who circuit right, where that term of
I
art.
think it comes out of circuit courts where judges held court in different places and they wrote
Uh,
they wrote on,
Oh,
they
okay.
wrote circuit, they wrote a loop. You know, and they held
Learn
court
something every day.
different places.
wow, okay.
And as part of this too, training and support for, so one of the concepts we have here is that we recognize that Vermont will unlikely, except in the B towns, we're talking about towns that have sort of done it, but I believe it's the B towns, not all of them, but in Vermont that have energy code enforcement officers.
Burlington,
Burlington,
Borough.
Brattleboro,
Almost village.
I don't know, so, Berlin, what's that?
Major
Barry,
city.
I mean, major cities, it's a major cities,
I don't.
but, yeah, maybe not, so, anyway.
Fire safe, I know our fire department goes out and does checks, but I don't think they do it with these codes, they do it for other things, we already handle that.
So given that it's unlikely Vermont will ever fund what most every other state has, and that's a code officer. There are opportunities for us to leverage the private sector. We've got a great energy ecosystem of energy professionals in the state who have national certifications, they run testing, they understand building science. So is there a way we can leverage their expertise and checking and working with builders to help them plan for compliance and then do the tests and inspections after the fact. So it's a concept right now. Efficiency Vermont has started supporting some of these energy professionals. We're calling them our energy consultants in the marketplace. I know Montpelier, we had talked about using some of them in your time of listing ordinance there. And so there are others as well too. And so how can we leverage the private sector and this expertise to help support the code compliance? And so it's a task that we put upon ourselves, to try to figure out over the next years. And then certainly the trainings are a big piece of what we're focusing on both for. And as well too, Efficiency Vermont runs the Energy Code Support Center right now. One of the things I do want to say around Efficiency Vermont, and they're clearly at the table, they've had an interest in this, they have this Energy Code Support Center. That their new construction program used to sort of be a robust program, it's diminished somewhat recently. It would be personally, I feel like it'd be great for them to be, we're not going to get to our goal of net zero buildings by 2030 without EVT at the table. And so we're encouraging them to try to figure out how we can, how they can support this. And there's a lot behind the scenes of that too. How can they claim savings by, which is really sort of how they operate, by supporting what builders are supposed to do by law, but we now know they're not. So should they assume that the baseline from which they claim savings is code, or is it where it is really? And so there are discussions that are going on between the Department of Public Service and Efficiency Vermont. And so I just want to put it out there that's something that I personally think is really important. They are our statewide resource, and it's going to be really important that they support the new construction this year.
And we've talked about this a little bit, the statutory role in terms of defining their obligations and their mission and what they, because they can only do what they can claim appropriate savings for, and yet there are things we like. So it's kilowatt hours saved, but we also now say, well, can you help us save greenhouse gas emissions? But they have a limited ability to do that under current law. So I think that's an area right for a deep and nuanced conversation in another year.
Look forward to that.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of, I think it's the last that we talked about this. So last page of details. Sorry about all of the minutia here, but these are important pieces that need to be pulled together into a sort of coherent. It'd be great to have a coherent body of effort here. We're sort of working on chipping away on the pieces here until there's an age change in place.
And I'm glad, that, you know, to me, it seems like the right level, because this is the tip of the iceberg compared to the conversations in the working group, but at least gives everyone in the room a sense of all the different pieces that were in that puzzle that we wanted to identify all the pieces, even if we come with them. Yeah, but, okay.
So things, I mean, so I'll just go through these quickly. So things like mail stuffers about the codes as part of water bills and other things, you know, working with lenders and attorneys, make sure that the loan closing checklist has the RV certificate been filed as part of the new construction project. Some lenders do that now, but that's not something that's required. Working with regional municipal websites, as well too. Somebody put forward a radio show on building science. No, I don't think we're doing.
Which that we don't necessarily fire, but there is one.
There was one, yes, there was one. Yeah, a couple of members of the committee had a weekly radio, you know, the car off.
House calls.
House calls, there, okay.
Scott Campbell, I assume, not anything.
Bradley,
You'll hear from.
Right, yeah, send us.
been in here about 50 years. Yeah. Thank you.
And then, so there's the big, you know, a big question around all this is how do you pay? So the section E is, you know, we need to develop a funding plan. Do we pay for this with permit fees? Or are there other mechanisms that make sense for this, you know, to go forward? So part of our DOE grant is to work on this and figure this out over the next couple of years. So we'll be working with all of you and your committee and others who are interested in this to figure out what that looks like. And then, you know, establishing a role, and we just talked about this with EVT, but there are two other energy efficiency utilities, or EEUs, and you probably know what that is, but it's Vermont Gas and EVT as well as EVT. So they all have responsibility for supporting the new construction sector. So what should that role be going forward? And then the final section of these is coordinating with this grant that we have. It's an opportunity, started January a couple months ago, but we'll have funds for the next few years to help support developing these pieces, doing the training, and moving these forward. So, you know, part of it is putting together a plan for how these pieces get assembled, how to pay for it, offering the training, supporting that code circuit rider position, and then, as part of that too, it's an advisory committee, and we suggested that the study committee members would make sense as the advisory committee on this grant going forward as well too, so there's some consistency. There's some recognition of the cost effectiveness analysis. We had some discussion about that. Decision to keep doing it the way that we've done it historically. If you're interested, I can talk about the details of that, but I don't think it's particularly relevant. But then also, because there was the recognition that we need to think about how cost of carbon is included in our future of our buildings, establishing a new committee that has the right people at the table to think about what that looks like and how to consider not only energy costs, but also the broader societal costs as well too. Okay,
Great. That was a perfect tour. But the one thing that got mentioned, and I'll just mention it because for the sake of completeness, you know, we license plumbers, we license electricians, we license HVAC people. We did a conversation about, again, you know, you're building, you're making the biggest investment of your life. Should your building be licensed? You know, and that relates to certifications, and it relates to the farmer's question about, well, what is that? So I just want to put that on the table. We didn't, that I think if that were to happen, I mean, that's why sometimes I think this is like 7 years worth of work and 7 years worth of evolution in terms of how we think about building things better in a way that's more cost effective for homeowners in the long run and less environmental damage associated with it, and then cheaper to own once we have something home built. But we knew we could jump to it.
Right, there's some steps we can take in the interim to move us down the path, but without jumping all the way to licensure.
Julie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You did not discuss necessarily the makeup or agreement that the organization came to. It looks like it's a pretty diverse member of committees. I'm wondering, and if this is the appropriate time to ask this question, you can tell me if not. Did you have any points of tension, that, I mean, obviously you did, I assume. But did you feel like the folks who represented the actual builders or the contractors, do you feel that this was something that they came along for, all the recommendations, or are we going to work on this bill and suddenly hear popcorn attempts at not doing specific things? What would you want us to look out for? There were points of disagreement, and what will I be hearing from my contractors?
Great question. Clearly, you know, we weren't all singing Kumbaya. So,
No one was actually hurt at any meeting.
but it was, I mean, in the prelude, or I don't know, the end of the study, I had to put something in there about how nice it is to work in Vermont in another contentious state where there are people like throwing chairs at each other. I mean, we had differences of opinion and they were voiced and listened to and recognized, and, you know, we came to a consensus document, but where there were differences of opinion, you know, you saw the column in there that those were voiced. I would say, I'll give a little perspective, I guess this sort of shows my age. I was on the governor's committee in 1996, or was it that put the code together? So I've been involved in all of the code update processes since then, pretty much in one capacity or another. When I was working at DPIC, at Vermont, and then as a contractor for the department. Otherwise, the beginning of this, you know, in the 90s, early stages, the home builders really came in kicking and screaming. They didn't have anything to do with it, and they've come around 180 degrees.
That's right.
You know, so I mean, Andrew's here representing them today, but we had home builders on the committee. They're active. You know, Matt as well did too. His membership was there and supported. They certainly didn't see, you know, 100% on all the issues, but I would say, you know, to answer your question, the better builders are represented by their trade associations, and those who aren't members may not see eye to eye. And they can, you know, you guys can probably speak better to this than I can, because you seem to be concurring with this.
So, Mr. Chair, can I just ask a clarifying question? Sure. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the membership of the committee largely reflected what we might characterize as the more professionalized contractors and builders in our state. And there wasn't necessarily an individual who represented perhaps the more, the handyman style of builder on the committee. Did you take any kind of feedback from that group of people, or did you get solicited feedback?
We had public sessions, every meeting, we had public opportunity. We ran out of time sometimes, but we would. I don't know that we heard. Yeah, I don't think that we heard from anybody who's represented that constituency.
Okay, I would say my only concern with this bill is that if the point is that we have compliance, and the people who are least able or knowing of the need for them to comply were not a part of the creation of the recommendations, that we're just kind of redoing the same situation all over again. So as long as that fear is assuaged, I feel very confident, and I don't know how you could have achieved that.
So you're not.
But yeah,
It's a great.
but that's
Yeah, you're right.
Mr. Musgrave,
Well, if I may, Matt Musgrave with the Associated General Contractors, and I think we like 253. It was something that we recommended in our recommendations, and I think it's fair to say that I personally tried to make an effort
Okay.
to voice not only what my members are telling me, but what we identified during the H-157 process, which was passed, I believe, out of the last legislature, so it would have been 2 years ago that was passed. And so during the conversations in this recommendation period, I kept calling out the fact that there are a lot of people that came, and you do recall this when you passed H-157, that a lot of these, I think you said popcorn calls start coming in from people that are figuring out, oh, they're gonna try to license me, oh, they're gonna do this. So I tried to keep at the forefront of our conversations in somewhat of an aggressive way. That there are gonna be people that are gonna come and oppose no matter what we do. So I personally been recommending an approach, and when it's appropriate to come back, maybe after the town meeting, we talk a little further. But when you passed H-157, it was with and you can look over the document and actually look into, there's a section that actually eliminates the authority that the Office of Professional Regulation has over 51 professions that they already have, which is the ability for the organization to create a standard level of care, to create a licensure, to create these things that would essentially get someone disbarred from the registry. And that was one of the only ways that you were able to get the majority to vote the bill through, was that no one had an appetite then for licensing. And it was based on the constituents that were calling. So.
Okay, well, that's very helpful and I appreciate it, and that gives me some confidence, because knowing that at least that was being voiced throughout was, because that was what I experienced.
They're gonna come back.
Yeah. So it's just as long as we feel like they are heard, that is helpful,
well,
so that.
and I worked on a crew all summer and fall. and
Yeah,
I
always know you heard it.
And many people come on and off the job site, and I would ask people about, their, how well did they know, were they aware of an energy code, and have they done any training, and so I would say that ecosystem is aware that there's something out there, but I think a lot of people haven't looked into what it is. And it wasn't, a lot of people are worried about, well, what would be required under anything, but, I also felt like there were a lot of good people that they would actually like to know the information. They are proud of the work they do. They're like skilled people, and if there's a problem with a way of doing something, they wanna figure it out. But, the big project I was on this fall had all sorts of rot in the walls because there was a failure to seal adequately around Cape when windows were installed. It ended up, because it wasn't properly insulated and sealed, water was warmer, moisture air was traveling into the wall, condensing on the inside of the outside casing.
Mold.
Took 20 years of condensation, but eventually it came back and it got into all the sheathing on the outside and was rotting away. And that was, somebody's probably kind of state-of-the-art construction project 30 years ago. So there's a figuring out, and then there's, careful execution. And I felt all the people I was working with wanted to do it well, but how to do it well was not always clear. And, but that's like the whole thing of, we talked a lot about training and education. If you have to give up your wage to go someplace and train, do you wanna stop making your living wage to try to go train? So we talked about, and you pay people for the time or miss something, so that while they're getting trained, they're also, and that organization has loads of training. So there's things
Great
around, but
facilities.
we had to really, it was just a complicated puzzle. I felt like everyone wanted to solve it. The question was like, okay, how do you build a whole sequence out? And that's why I'm always describing this as the 7-year program. Senator Watson.
Senator McDonald has hand up before me.
We have an automobile inspection system.
I think we're all familiar with it. We've all engaged in it. What does the current system of home building have in common with our automobile inspection system? Just a couple factual things that they have in common.
Well, there's a self-certification component to it, to some
I've
extent.
never been successful self-certifying.
But your mechanic is certifying that vehicle meets the standards. And the builder is self-certifying the home they built meets the standards. If somebody's asking for that certification, which is the case in half, 2/3 of the town, something like that. So nobody, I don't, beyond that, there's nobody sort of coming around to the towns and saying, show us the records of the certificates that have been filed here. Yes, the Department of Public Service, where's the database of the certificates that have been mailed to the department? I think they're in a file cabinet somewhere. They did put them in a Excel file at some point in time, but I don't think they're publicly accessible. So I believe that doesn't the state come and look over the automobile inspection records, the spot inspections? I don't know if they do or not. I assume that they do. They're supposed to, this why.
Where you get your ticket pulled.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't have, I mean, you're looking for similarities. I see a lot.
Well, I was expecting a lot, I was expecting some.
Right. I don't know, maybe others can help me here. I see one is that, you know, the builder or the mechanic are self-certifying that what they see meets the standard.
I mean, I think they're very different, actually. I don't think I would use them as two comparisons, because the other difference is, while there are manufactured homes, I mean, for the most part, you're not building a car. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're purchasing a product.
People that inspect automobiles don't build them either.
I know, but there's like okay, I think they're very different.
I think they are very extraordinarily
Okay.
different.
Okay.
I was trying to find
Similarity.
one, two similarities.
Mr. Musgrave,
I might be able to throw maybe one factual piece in there. So, not all new home builds, but many new home builds, particularly ones that are working with a mortgage on a builder loan, or they are working with a real estate agent that's helping procure the property, they're oftentimes recommending a private entity, known as an inspection service, which is, I believe, housed in fire and safety. Correct? I think you put their letters. Yeah, they're licensed in fire and safety. Yeah, licensed individuals from fire and safety who already are being hired by the consumers to make sure that the builders are doing their work appropriately. That's why when I sold real estate, it was really hard sometimes to get in that relationship and recommend the inspector, but it's largely done. So you're having inspections that are done on these properties, but where you're that similar to how your car inspection process works is that we're talking here today about like an AHJ, which would be a government entity, which would go out and then therefore do inspections, right? That's completely different to the world that the cars live in, where we actually are certifying mechanics and shops to actually perform those inspections on behalf of the consumer. So really, it's not government that's doing those inspections, it's actually private third parties that are certified, which is exactly the same in the home process, whether you're buying an existing home or a new home, you've got a licensed inspector.
For you saying that the people who engage in mortgages, are covering their own.
They do have a process that's a little bit different than
Because
this.
they might not get paid at the place.
Well, on a traditional
Well,
builder loan, you'll have people, inspectors come out at different stages during the process, they're already doing that. For a new build where you're getting a construction loan, it's a little bit different if you do what's known as a turnkey. Where you might go into a development where a builder builds a spec house, and then you're buying that for the $750,000 or whatever new house costs today.
The other
We try,
thing,
I mean,
well, the other thing, Sam, right now, remember a few years ago, there was not a super smooth transition. The state started using those, iPad, like, at all the motor vehicle places, right? They have like a standardized way of doing the assessment and the reporting. And we haven't put anything out like that. There are ways of assessing homes, but no, the state has not said, oh, you need to go get a home energy rating service. A HERS rating on your home in order, it needs to be 58 or above.
Well, so Massachusetts says so.
We have this goal of, like, 2030, what's the goal?
It is a net zero
And
ready.
it's already by 2030. Which means that if you put solar panels on it, it would make up for the energy used that it used over the course of the year.
It's a pretty ambitious.
Well, all right. So is automobile inspection. Everybody's gotta have brakes by, the work by 2030 or something like that. So,
Hopefully they work before they.
when you turn the lights on, you could,
yeah, there
but
is,
we don't have anything but this for homes.
Right.
So. My dad used to talk about something that was really an empty tube of toothpaste. And I wonder about this energy goal by 2030, is it an empty tube of toothpaste?
No, because I mean, there are lots of examples of homes that are already achieving that, so we know we can do it. But it takes education and motivation and, there's
And some certification by someone other than the,
well, it's,
if I could have self-served.
Yeah.
Certified my college experience, I would have been to that, anyway.
And Watson,
Thank you. Thank you for this. So just looking at some suggestions here. Compared with what is in the bill, like, so there's only, I mean, my understanding of the bills, there's more or less 3 parts, right? Like, there's the findings. Cool. There is the working group, and then there's like changing a shell to a May for both RVs and CVs, right?
There's lots of opportunity.
Yeah, my only confusion is that in the time frame for implementation, like this all of A, I mean, so fair enough, I like if the working group is gonna be working, like, well, what's proposed in A is a big deal. And that would be a major change. So I need to look at this more closely. That has to like, the working group, is the working group taking, I mean, I know that it's like continuing their work, but I assume that it's continuing to work out like how this would look.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are able to take 8, 4, 5, and 6 and do something with building registry, that would be. That would be
Okay.
huge, that's something that feels like it's achievable. I don't think what we are is in the room here today, if they. But
yeah, but the 8 through 6, I think, we can actually do.
Okay, so. Okay. Yeah, part of my question was like, 2024 is like, what's checked off here? And like that, at least for A1, that feels pretty ambitious, but 2 through 6.
yeah, you're already doing
those-
2 and 3, it's already in the
Okay, so
it's 2 and 3.
Yep,
And
Yeah.
and essentially,
Okay,
you're absolutely
so-
right, the discussion about the HJ is a longer term proposition, but naming a committee to start talking about that. I think is
Yeah.
important, your bill doesn't specifically say, right now, it doesn't point to the building code, it's more, but anyhow, you can clean that up.
okay,
So.
so potentially adding,
Right, so thanks so much for adding,
Yeah.
to help us, like, what are we doing in the bill versus?
right, yeah,
So the A, the reason I think A1 is in here as 2024
mhm,
is to keep that discussion alive in the form of work.
right, I want to, I want I suppose that means that we ought to make sure that it's explicitly called out as part of their duties.
Yeah. Cause this was drafted when I was talking to
Yeah,
council about it. I didn't get into the details
Mhm.
and this report wasn't finished. Until after our draft
Okay.
deadline. So yeah, it's totally a
That's-
great idea to actually take this report, and go back into the bill
okay,
and look at.
And while you're at it, B would be great too. I don't, you know, we have to figure out how to pay for that, but just having, there's so much discussion about having a central database and leaving the towns that obligation. And having a place for consumers to go see how their home they're buying did.
yeah, especially if they are going through, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's it.
Well, so yeah, especially if DFS is going through sort of a reconfiguration of their database right now, anyway, it feels timely. So
Yeah,
I'm not opposed, I also just wanna,
we weren't encouraged to think about that so much, by DFS, that they read their answer,
yeah,
but
no, well, I mean,
But-
the assumption is
it's a.
we would also, if we're gonna send to them, we support.
Yeah.
Does it mean something, cool.
Well, so, thank you, Richard, for coming in, Mr. Basie, thank you, Mr. Musgrave, Mr. Brewer, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Matt Cozenser and Oliver Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for coming in. Thanks committee for hanging in there and taking on getting another dated reference, the Ed Sullivan Show. These have people, they had all these little sticks and on top of them, they put a plate and then they get their plate spinning. And we had one really big plate spinning for about the first 7 weeks of the second, it's called the River Porterville. And now we have like 3 more plates spinning, but it's such a talented group, I have no fear that we'll be having plates.
And I would say that I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Brewer and Mr. Musgrave, but I think we're all happy to help support or, you know, if you need any assistance, please let us know.